we need to talk about Link. So hey everyone, welcome back to Upside Down Data. Today I want to talk about Link and where it might be going next from here as it starts to consolidate after this very impressive run. So Link, of course, was one of the big movers in this altcoin rally that we have seen. Link rallied from the September lows all the way up to about 190% to the upside, currently trading at about 145% to the upside. Very impressive move, but now it looks like it might need to spend some time consolidating. So I want to look at some data to let us see if that seems like the most likely outcome or if it's just going to continue moving up from here. So one of the things we can look at is our short-term upside downside potential indicator. If you're not familiar, this is a risk model that we have here on the channel. So higher values mean higher risk, lower values lower risk, and it cares about moves that play out over days to weeks, so shorter term in its time horizon. If you want to see live data from this model and more, you can do so over at our website, PolarityDigital.io. Link is in the description. So this was something that we had been watching for a while, all throughout this rally with Link, was what was going on with its short-term UDPI. And one of the things you'll notice is just how overextended it really got. And we were talking about this over on our Discord. If you haven't checked that out, again, link is in the description for that also. And over on X, I was also posting about this, where it really shot up to the upside. And it got to the point where we're up well above 4, which is getting very close to the top of the scale. The scale tops out at 5. Really, we haven't seen those kind of risk levels since August of 2021 and these other periods in peak bull market. And so Link finding a local top, or at least finding some resistance, having to correct and consolidate, made a lot of sense. And we were talking about that as this was playing out. And then more recently, you'll notice that the short-term UDPI for Link is starting to fall. It's starting to decrease. And that is a good sign. That's what you want to see, because what you often will see in these broader uptrends in a bull market, for example, here is that you'll have risk shoot off to the upside. Let's take, for example, here in 2019, and then you'll catch some local top. You might have to go down, correct, consolidate, maybe go sideways. That allows risk to cool off before the next move up, risk cool off, next move up, so on and so forth. And that just lets you kind of keep moving up. And so really, when you get to these extreme risk points, then the remaining upside is getting quite low. That's really what the model is telling you. The remaining upside potential is quite low. Downside potential is quite large. And generally speaking, it's hard for the asset to just continue ripping from those really high risk levels. You prefer to see it cool off quite a bit, and then that can set the stage for that next leg up. That can set in that bottom that allows things to move up from there. So this is playing out exactly the way we'd expect it to, where we went up, put in really impressive moves, but now it's probably time for Link to cool off. And that could come either in the form of a notable correction to the downside or even just sideways consolidation. Either of those should allow for short-term risk to cool off to set the stage for that next leg up down the line. So that's one of the things I'm looking at to make me think that in the short term, this does make a lot of sense. And I personally am not on the boat that thinks that Link is just going to immediately go ripping back up to the upside. Anything's possible, of course, in crypto, but I would lean much more on the side personally of this being a more extended consolidation, maybe even correction. Not financial advice, of course. You should make your own opinions about the data. Another thing we can look at that's useful both for short-term thinking, but also for a longer-term perspective is our momentum bias indicator, or MBI. So this quantifies, is the momentum bias to the upside, is the prevailing momentum positive, where any dips will quickly be bought up and price just continues shooting to the upside, or is the momentum biased to the downside? And so with the MBI, what you'll tend to see is different types of behavior in different parts of the market cycle. In bear markets, like for example here in 2021, 2022, what you can see is that the MBI will spend a lot more time in the red than in the green, and you'll get these points where you try to poke your head up and reestablish positive momentum bias, but fail, go back down to the downside further and further and further. But then in this transition out of a bear market into a bull market, what you'll see is this equal oscillation around zero. And what's notable about Link, and we actually talked about this at the time as well for Link, it's been showing that kind of early bull market behavior, that transitionary behavior on the MBI, really all throughout this range, this massive range it was stuck in ever since May of 2022. Really, by the time we got to summer of 2022 and onwards, we were just equally oscillating around zero more or less. And then ultimately that built into this big catapult we've seen coming up to the upside. Not too dissimilar, in fact, what we saw through here in 2018. This bear market kind of behavior here, and then started to oscillate around zero, and then exploded to the upside. And so I think this move here in a lot of ways actually has some similarities to this move here. Now, that's obviously a sample size of 1, so it's very speculative, but it would not shock me if that's the kind of thing that maybe Link has in store, where we had this big breakout, this big impressive move, but maybe we need to spend a bit of time, and I don't know how long exactly, maybe very short, maybe very long, who knows, but some amount of time in here, maybe something looking like this, where we spend more time oscillating around zero. We just had this big breakout. Maybe the NBI comes back down and starts spending more time oscillating around zero, or maybe we have that kind of general uptrend, more or less, that builds into the next big explosion, which could be the bigger bull run in the future. So we'll have to see how that plays out, but this is one of the models I'm going to be watching. That both, it tells us in the short term, it seems like Link was getting very overextended. When you get to these really extreme momentum bias readings, they tend to mark local tops. So that's what we saw here. So that's just one more data point suggesting that some more cooling off might be needed. But then the good news is that maybe we're setting the stage for something like this, where this might make people say, oh, what's Link doing? Oh, it's just going sideways. But really what it could just mean is it's building up its strength again to explode up into that next bull market type of behavior, which is what you see through here. You're spending a lot more time up in the green than in the red. So personally, I don't see this as being bearish. And even if Link does need to correct from here, so even if we do break down below this current level that we're at here, even if we have to go back down and retest the $11 range that we were kind of stuck at for a bit over here, or even if we have to go all the way back down and test the top of this range, I don't think that that is long-term bearish. Now, a lot of people probably don't want to hear that. Especially anyone who is buying Link up here, you probably don't want to hear that maybe we have to go back and retest these levels. But that might just allow for a healthier market structure where we can flip this former resistance that lasted for over a year into support that could give us that base to go into the next move up and then set in a macro higher high relative to here. Finally get us back up into these higher regions to ultimately then make a run at the all-time high later on. And this is not, I don't think this is an unreasonable thing. I mean, a very similar thing actually happened back over here. If you just look at Link, this first big push up, we pushed up to about $1.40. And then in this push up here, look how we came back and we retested that level multiple times. It acted as resistance here, flipped it into support, and that gave us the fuel to go and do this. So that's where, if that were to happen, and I don't think it has to happen, but if it were to happen, I don't think that that would be a bearish development. Short term, it might not be the most pleasant thing to see, but ultimately it might just allow for additional better entries in the Link for anyone who would have missed out or anyone who wanted to add. Now, again, not financial advice. And this, of course, also still assumes that we're in an early bull market and that, generally speaking, in the coming couple of years, maybe, that prices will generally trend up and that Link has a good shot at breaking all-time highs. And I'm aware of things like recession risk and all that kind of stuff. Obviously, those are things that one has to keep in mind. But assuming we are in the early stages of a bull market, and I think the data currently points in that direction, then that might be a longer term possibility, which in the short term might feel relatively painful, but in the long term, I don't think anyone would be that upset. You know, if we're a few years down the line and Link is trading above all-time highs, are you going to be mad that it went back down? Like, imagine this happened, that it went back down and retested this resistance zone before moving up? I don't think so. I think, if anything, you might have just been happy to have another buying opportunity. So, of course, not financial advice, but just something to keep in mind. And so the final thing I wanted to mention then, in terms of going back to what Link is going to do in that kind of shorter term and why I think some more consolidation might be needed, in addition to what we're seeing on the models for Link, how it just got so overextended in the short term and how its momentum bias really got far away to points that usually mark local tops. The other thing is that I think it's plausible that the broader crypto market also has to consolidate and correct from here and kind of chop around. I've talked about this about Bitcoin as well, where Bitcoin had this big move up. We then kind of set in this next move up where we pushed higher. And now we're kind of struggling for Bitcoin to maintain that upward movement. And a lot of that looks very similar to these prior moves up that Bitcoin has had in the past. And so it wouldn't be shocking to me at all if Bitcoin has to spend more time consolidating. Bitcoin, being the thing that tends to lead the way with the crypto market, might ultimately lead to a lot of altcoins doing similar things. And that doesn't mean that all altcoins are going to correct immediately. And it wouldn't be surprising me at all if Link even has more volatility, and maybe even it goes and puts in a new year-to-date high before it has to consolidate further. But it does seem like that initial explosive move might be getting exhausted for a lot of assets. and we might have some chop to go from here. And so I think the bigger question is it just sideways chop, or is it more of a correction? But ultimately, in the long term, it might not really matter. People might not really care. Because again, look back at this range for Link. If you just look back at this now, knowing what it did going off of that, this does not seem like a bad thing. During the time, it probably did. A lot of people were probably very scared during each of these drawdowns that Link experienced. But then ultimately, it didn't really matter. And that's just the way that these markets tend to go. They will scare you in the moment when they do things like that. Then with the benefit of hindsight, obviously it looks very different. And that's why we have these models, because they let us decipher, figure out, is it likely that this is going to start playing out? Should we expect this? And if it comes, then it's expected. It's not really as scary anymore. And if it's part of a broader bullish picture, then I don't think it's particularly worrisome at all. Now, again, that's with the caveats, normal caveats in mind, that we don't see broader markets nuke, we don't have a recession that sends everything way lower, so on and so forth. Very kind of known narrative at this time, not something we can ignore, but currently it's not the thing that I am letting drive my decision. I think that we are in a early bull market in crypto until the data point in a different direction, and therefore I think it's reasonable to have that as being the base case. So, of course, not financial advice, you can make your own opinions, but that's what I'm looking at right now for Link and thinking about what it might have in store for it going forward. All right, if you want to see live data from our models and more, you can do so over at our website, claritydigital.io. Link is in the description. You want to check out our Discord, the link to that is also in the description. And if you like the content, remember to subscribe to the channel, give the video a like, and follow us over on X. A lot of updates about our models and more over there.